Have you ever felt that feeling that something is off, but you can't explain it? That silent intuition that whispers that life, seemingly perfect, hides secrets that can destroy everything in seconds? Well, that's exactly how I felt that Sunday night, looking at my family gathered around the table. A family dinner should be a time of togetherness, laughter, and shared memories. But what I received was a blow so low it could have destroyed me. My daughter-in-law, with that cool, confident smile, leaned close to my ear and whispered the phrase that turned my world upside down. "I'm pregnant with your husband's child." In that instant, the ground seemed to disappear. But instead of tears or outrage, what came out of my mouth was a simple, calm smile and a short sentence. "Don't worry, dear." She didn't understand. No one understood. But I already knew that sometimes the best way to win is in silence, observing your opponent's game until the right moment to act. And that's why I'm here today to tell you how I turned the tables. How a betrayed, humiliated, and underestimated woman managed to expose the truth without shouting, without demeaning herself, and without losing her dignity. This isn't just a story of betrayal, but of intelligence, patience, and a comeback. Prepare to dive into a plot filled with silent manipulation, family secrets, revealed lies, and a revenge that didn't require hatred to be complete. Because sometimes the greatest power lies in letting the other person fall into your own trap. Now, I invite you to follow me to the end of this story. And, as you listen, comment on which city you're watching from so I know how far this message will reach. Ready to find out how it all ended? Then take a deep breath and come with me. The family dinner was impeccable, as always. The solid wood table reflected the soft glow of the chandelier, and the porcelain dishes inherited from my grandmother lent a touch of tradition to the evening. Everything seemed perfectly harmonious, as if it were just another Sunday. But deep down, I sensed something in the air, something dense and heavy, like the calm before a storm. My son Judd was excited, sharing stories from work, unaware that in that very room lay secrets ready to explode. Cedric, my husband, kept his eyes fixed on his plate, avoiding any eye contact with me. Lilia, my daughter-in-law, wore that cold, calculated smile that always gave me chills. She seemed to be delighting in something only she knew. That's when it all happened. Lilia stood up triumphantly and, amid laughter and curious glances, announced she had life-changing news. Judd, beaming, took her hand, unaware of the venom hidden behind that smile. "I'm pregnant," she said in a sweet, almost angelic voice. The room filled with applause and congratulations, but I noticed something no one else did. Her eyes weren't on Judd. They were on Cedric. And when everyone was distracted by the false happiness of the moment, she approached me with slow, measured steps, as if preparing to drive the final stake. She leaned in, and with a whisper that chilled my spine said, "I'm pregnant with your husband's child, you old hag." It was like a knife had been pierced through my chest, but instead of bursting into tears or making a fuss, something unexpected happened. I simply smiled. A serene, almost enigmatic smile that left her speechless for a few seconds. And, in a soft voice, I replied, "Don't worry, dear." Her eyes widened in confusion. She expected screams, tears, humiliation. But all she received was calm, and that unnerved her. It was then that I realized the game wasn't over yet. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't put on the show she wanted. I knew the truth always finds a way to come out, and if she wanted to play the game, I'd play it better. But without rushing, without despair. Sometimes the best weapon is the silence that observes, analyzes, and plans. Have you ever felt that moment when, inside, you're shattered, but on the outside, you maintain a facade of strength? It's in that exact moment that you discover the power of not reacting immediately. And it was with this serenity that I began to write the ending of this story. An ending Lilia never imagined. For 43 years, my life with Cedric seemed to have been built on solid foundations. We shared leisurely breakfasts, lazy Sundays in the garden, and a comfortable silence that only those who have lived a lifetime together understand. Our colonial house was a reflection of what I believed to be stability. Large windows, historic furniture, and a garden that always bloomed in spring. I believed nothing could break this harmony. Our son, Judd, has always been the pride of the family. A kind-hearted man, but sometimes too naive to perceive the intentions of those around him. When he introduced Lilia, I felt an inexplicable chill run through me. She was young, beautiful, and had a way of observing people that unnerved me, as if she were studying every weakness to exploit it at the right moment. But for the love of my son, I remained silent. At first, Lilia seemed simply enchanted by the life Judd could offer her. She wormed her way into the world, earning everyone's trust with sweet compliments and a seemingly submissive demeanor. But there was something in her eyes, a predatory glint that no one but me seemed to notice. It was like an animal on the prowl, waiting for the exact moment to pounce. Over time, I noticed Cedric becoming more distant. He, who had always been attentive and present, began avoiding conversations, looking away without explanation. Small changes in his routine began to emerge. Untimely phone calls, quick exits with vague excuses, and a weary look he couldn't hide. He seemed to carry an invisible weight, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. Judd, for his part, remained blind. He was in love, surrendered to this woman who, little by little, dominated everything around her. And Lilia, always polite in front of him, never missed a chance to make veiled comments to belittle me, always with a smile that only I understood. It was like living with a snake coiled in the room, ready to strike. The evenings at home no longer held the same lightness. Cedric spent more time in his office. Judd and Lilia were always making unexpected visits, and somehow she always managed to get a few minutes alone with my husband. I could feel the tension growing, like a silent crack spreading through the walls of my house, ready to collapse at any moment. And it was in this seemingly perfect environment, yet filled with secrets and glances that spoke volumes, that the bombshell of that night exploded. I just didn't imagine that what came next would be even more devastating. That night seemed designed to be special. I had lovingly prepared every detail, from the roast fragrant with fresh garden herbs to the dessert Judd had always loved as a child. I wanted it to be a moment of togetherness, a rare moment of being together, away from the worries of everyday life. But deep down, there was a strange feeling, a silent tension that hung in the air like a shadow. Judd was beaming, talking about the future, career plans, and travel. Lilia watched him with a smile that didn't quite match the tenderness of a loving wife. It was a sharp smile, one that seemed to carry secrets. Cedric, meanwhile, mechanically cut his meat, avoiding my gaze, as if his eyes betrayed something he couldn't hide. It was at the height of this seemingly peaceful atmosphere that Lilia stood up. With a theatrical air, she placed her hand on her still flat stomach and said in a sweet voice full of false emotion, "I have news that will change everything for our family." Judd nearly dropped his glass in excitement. His eyes shone with hope and innocence. "I'm pregnant," she announced, and the room immediately filled with applause and congratulations. Judd jumped from his chair to hug her, overcome with pure joy, unaware that he was celebrating a cruel lie. He looked at me with teary eyes, repeating, "Mommy, you're going to be a grandmother." My heart, which should have burst with joy, only clenched in a way that physically hurt. As everyone toasted the new life, Lilia slowly approached. She pretended to give me a hug, leaned over my shoulder, and with a venomous whisper, dropped the words that chilled my blood. "I'm pregnant with your husband's child, you old hag." For a second, I felt the ground disappear. Everything around me went silent, as if time had stopped, but I didn't react as she expected. I took a deep breath and with a serene smile looked at her and said, "Don't worry, dear." I saw the look of surprise cross her face. She wanted tears, screams, a scandal. She wanted to humiliate me there, in front of everyone. But she got none of that, just a riddle, a silent counterattack, and in that moment, I understood that calm would be my greatest weapon. Revenge wouldn't come in the heat of the moment. I wouldn't give her the pleasure of seeing my pain. If I wanted to play, I would wait for the right moment to turn all the cards on the table. And little did she know, I was willing to go all the way. After that night, everything seemed to have changed color. Every look, every gesture, every word carried a different weight. Suddenly, I began to remember small details that had previously seemed insignificant, but now took on a sinister meaning. Cedric's schedule, for example, had become unpredictable. He'd say he needed to run simple errands, like buy gardening tools, but would return hours later, looking weary and evasive. Lilia's frequent visits to our house also came to mind. She always showed up with innocent excuses, like learning family recipes or seeking marriage advice. At first, it seemed like a sweet gesture, but then I realized she always chose times when Judd was at work. Coincidence? No. I remembered walking past the kitchen and seeing them, Cedric and Lilia, talking in hushed tones. When I entered, the conversation would abruptly stop. Cedric would make up something about gardening or dinner, while Lilia would just smile, as if amused by my discomfort. This silent complicity gnawed at me, even when I tried to believe it was just paranoia. Suspicious purchases also began to surface. One day, I found a receipt from a jewelry store in another city, with a date that didn't coincide with any of our special occasions. When I asked Cedric, he said he was preparing a surprise for my birthday, which was still months away. The answer didn't convince my heart. Little by little, I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. The place that had once brought me peace was now filled with shadows. Every corner seemed to hide a secret. Every gesture carried a hidden meaning. At night, lying next to Cedric, I wondered who this man sleeping beside me was, and if I really knew him. And as if that weren't enough, Lilia's behavior became increasingly bold. She began making ambiguous comments in front of Judd, phrases that seemed like compliments but were loaded with ulterior motives. It was as if she was testing my limits, wanting to see how long I could last without reacting. I could no longer ignore it. Doubt consumed me like a slow poison. Something much bigger than a simple betrayal was happening, and I needed to find out, but I wouldn't do it impulsively. I knew I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes to be certain before any confrontation. The next morning, as Cedric left for one of his quick trips downtown, I felt it was time to act. My heart was pounding, but my mind was cool and calculated. I climbed the stairs in silence, entering the office he had always considered his private retreat. The room smelled of antique wood and the discreet perfume he had worn for decades. It was like invading a sanctuary I had always respected, but now I needed to cross that threshold. I opened drawers with trembling hands, as if he might appear at any moment. At first, I found only ordinary papers, bills, old letters, garden notes. But at the back of one of the bottom drawers, there was a manila envelope hidden beneath gardening magazines. When I opened it, I saw bank statements for an account I didn't recognize. The numbers startled me: large deposits, cash withdrawals in amounts never part of our routine. I photographed each page with my phone, feeling a chill run down my spine. Why would he have a hidden account? Was it to keep his secret from Lilia? Or was there something even more serious? My heart wanted to cry, but my mind screamed that it wasn't time yet. I took a deep breath and put everything back exactly as it was, leaving no trace that I'd touched it. Later, while washing the dishes, I noticed a strange movement through the kitchen window. Lilia had just arrived in her silver sedan, parking with all the confidence of someone who feels like she owns a place that doesn't belong to her. She walked straight to the garden, where Marcus, the gardener, was trimming the rose bushes. From where I stood, I could see the two exchanging quick, intense words. Suddenly, Lilia pulled something out of her bag. It was a white envelope. Marcus looked around nervously before accepting it and putting it in his coat pocket. This wasn't just gardening talk. I knew I'd just witnessed a secret transaction, but I couldn't understand what was connecting them. Was Marcus just an accomplice, or was there more involved than I realized? My heart was pounding so hard it echoed in the kitchen. I wanted to run out and confront them, but I held back. I'd learned that haste ruins any strategy. I needed to see more, hear more. I knew that if I rushed, Lilia would turn the tables on me. So I just watched, my blood boiling, as she said goodbye and walked back to the car with that same victorious smile. At that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complex plot, with secrets, blackmail, and lies far greater than I could have imagined. I wasn't just fighting a jealous woman. I was entering a game of manipulation that involved much more than my marriage, and I needed to uncover every piece of this puzzle before taking the next step. The nights began to become even stranger. Cedric, always a homebody, began making little excuses to go out after dinner. He'd say he needed to buy something for the garden or visit an old friend, but he'd return late, exhausted and silent. Each return was accompanied by a heavy sigh, as if he were carrying a burden he couldn't share with me. One night, I heard the phone ring. He answered too quickly, almost anxiously. He whispered a few words I couldn't understand, and when he returned to the living room, he looked paler than before. "I need to step out for a moment." "Nothing major," he said, avoiding my gaze. My heart sank, but I feigned casualness. I decided it wasn't time to ask yet. I needed facts, not assumptions. The next day, something even more disturbing happened. While watering the plants on the balcony, I heard voices in the garden. I approached quietly and saw Lilia and Marcus. They were standing far from the gate, near the tool shed, as if to stay out of reach of prying eyes. The conversation seemed tense. Marcus gesticulated nervously, while Lilia kept her arms crossed, as firm as a snake about to strike. "This wasn't agreed," I heard Marcus say, his voice thick with fear. "You promised you wouldn't involve anyone else." Lilia replied quietly, but her icy tone was clear. Even without understanding the words, Marcus shook his head, as if regretting something, but he couldn't escape the web. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a forbidden relationship. There was something much bigger going on. Then Lilia noticed my silhouette in the distance. For a second our eyes met. She smiled. A cold, almost challenging smile. Then she turned to Marcus and whispered something before walking away, as if nothing had happened. Marcus stood there, head down, and soon after he hurried out of the garden. I stood there, breathless, feeling like I was on the verge of a revelation, but still without the complete pieces of the puzzle. That night, Cedric left again, with another vague excuse. Before closing the door, he looked at me with a look that mixed weariness and regret. It was then that I realized he was trapped by something. It wasn't just the guilt of an affair. There was a weight, a moral or emotional debt he couldn't confess, and Lilia was the key to it all. I began to feel a mixture of anger and compassion. Anger at being deceived, compassion because, somehow, Cedric seemed as much a victim as I was. And as I lay in bed, alone, I realized I needed to find out the truth now before it swallowed us whole. I was about to uncover something that would change the course of our entire family. That rainy afternoon, fate decided to deliver the answers I'd been searching for. I was in the living room, folding clothes, when I heard voices coming from the garden. They were low, urgent, and tense. Curious, I walked to the side window that faced the back of the house. There, among the rose bushes, I saw Cedric, Lilia, and Marcus. The three of them, together. That was strange enough to put me on alert. The conversation felt like an argument. Cedric spoke in a tone he rarely used, firm, almost pleading. "You already got what you wanted, Lilia. Why continue this?" She crossed her arms, impassive. Marcus, nervous, tried to intervene. "This is going too far. Judd doesn't deserve..." But Lilia cut him off with a sharp look. I couldn't hear everything, but each fragment was like a knife. Suddenly, Marcus raised his voice. "She's blackmailing you, Cedric. She's using Judd's debts to manipulate you." My heart raced. Debts? Judd's? My son's? The world seemed to spin. Cedric lowered his head, visibly broken. "I had no choice. I had to protect our son," he said, his voice breaking. It was like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Lilia laughed, a low, cruel laugh that echoed in my chest. "You think you can stop now? I haven't finished what I started," she said, full of venom. Marcus shook his head, embarrassed. "This has gone too far. And the baby will reveal everything anyway." At that moment, I felt my legs weaken. The baby, then the truth came, knocking the wind out of me. "This child isn't Judd's, nor Cedric's," Marcus confessed, his voice thick with guilt. "He's mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Lilia pressed her lips together as if she hadn't expected him to have the courage to admit it. Cedric went pale, his hands shaking. I, on the other side of the window, felt tears burn my eyes. Suddenly, everything made sense. The blackmail, Lilia's victorious look, Cedric's mysterious departures. He wasn't guilty of treason. He was covering for Judd, who was deep in debt and paying the price to protect his son. Lilia had ensnared everyone in her web of lies, using the pregnancy as a bargaining chip, and Marcus was just another victim trapped in her game. I stepped out of the window slowly, as if carrying a ton of weight on my shoulders. I finally knew the truth, but I still didn't know how to use it. I felt anger, sadness, and, paradoxically, a strange relief. It wasn't Cedric who had betrayed me, but there was still a bomb waiting to explode. Now I had to decide, expose everything immediately or wait for the perfect moment to dismantle, piece by piece, the house of cards Lilia had built. The next day, I woke with a strange mix of serenity and urgency. I needed concrete proof, something impossible to refute, to dismantle Lilia's lies. It was time to investigate further. I waited until Cedric left for the market and Judd was busy at work, and then I calmly climbed the stairs to the guest room, the one Lilia used whenever she was alone. The place was impeccable, as always. But I knew that people like her, so confident in their manipulation, always left traces. I opened drawers, looked under neatly folded clothes, and finally, at the bottom of a travel bag, I found a white envelope with a clinic logo. My heart raced when I recognized what it was. Inside the envelope was a piece of paper with cold, clinical language. Paternity test. Result: Marcus Daniel Santos, probability of paternity, 99.7%. For a moment, the world spun. It was confirmation of what Marcus had confessed in the garden. The baby wasn't Judd's, nor Cedric's. It was Marcus's, the gardener's. The final piece of the puzzle was in my hands, but at the same time, I understood why Lilia kept this document. She was cunning. If things got out of hand, she could use the test as insurance, claim she'd been deceived, blame Cedric, paint herself as a victim, and still come out on top. It was a chess game in which her every move was calculated. I was dealing with someone who not only lied, but built layers of lies to protect herself. I gripped that paper so tightly my knuckles turned white. A whirlwind of emotions overcame me. Relief at having definitive proof, disgust at Lilia's coldness, and sadness at how far it had all come. I also felt a strange sense of compassion for Cedric, who had shouldered the blame for something he hadn't done, simply to protect our son. I tucked the document into my purse, my heart pounding. Now, I held the key to freeing my family from that nightmare. But I knew I couldn't reveal it just like that. I had to choose the right moment, preferably one that wouldn't leave room for Lilia to react or distort the story. I needed to expose everything with elegance and precision, so she would no longer have any power over us. As I descended the stairs, I took a deep breath. My next step would be to transform this pain into a strategy. I wouldn't be the woman who simply cries and suffers in silence. I would be the woman who, with dignity, dismantles the enemy without having to stoop to their level. And the ideal moment for this was already in my plans. I spent 3 full days planning every detail of the upcoming dinner. I wanted it to be impeccable, worthy of a special occasion, but behind that welcoming exterior lay the revelation that would change everything. I prepared Judd's favorite dishes so he would feel at home and unarmed. I chose the most beautiful china, the most elegant linen tablecloth. If I were to unmask Lilia, I would do it with class. When they arrived, Judd was radiant, as he always was when he came to visit. He entered with his arm around Lilia, who was wearing a delicate, pale dress, pretending to be the perfect mother-to-be. Cedric was visibly tense, but he looked at me with a hint of confidence. He knew I had something prepared, even if he didn't know exactly what. Dinner started off calmly. We talked about light-hearted things, laughed about old memories, and even Lilia tried to maintain a sweet demeanor. But I could sense a certain nervousness in every look in her eyes. She sensed something was different that night. It was as if my calmness was disconcerting. Judd, poor thing, didn't notice a thing. He talked excitedly about the future baby, about plans to prepare a special room in their house. When dessert was served, I took a deep breath. It was time to act. I gently placed an envelope on the table. Lilia looked at me, and for a brief moment I saw her eyes lose their confident gleam. "Honey," I began softly, "I think you left this at my place the other day." I pushed the envelope toward her. The silence was so deep I could hear the sound of silverware clicking. Judd looked curious, grabbed the envelope before Lilia could react, and began reading the document. The smile faded from his face, replaced by an expression of confusion, then shock. "What is this?" he asked, his voice breaking. His eyes filled with tears as he stared at his wife. "Lilia, who is Marcus Daniel Santos?" The name hung heavy in the air. She tried to speak, but no justification seemed sufficient. Cedric, tears in his eyes, finally broke the silence. "Son, I never betrayed you. I accepted being the villain so you wouldn't be destroyed by the shame of debt. I let her use me to protect you." Judd slumped in his seat, as if the weight of the world had fallen on his shoulders. Then, Lilia showed her true colors. She tried to turn the tables, saying she was the victim, that Marcus had deceived her, that it was all a misunderstanding. But it was too late. The document spoke for itself. Judd shook his head, unable to believe the woman he loved had schemed so badly. "You destroyed me," he whispered, his voice breaking. Cedric held my hand under the table, a silent apology. I simply took a deep breath and maintained my composure. I didn't shout, I didn't argue, I didn't need to lower myself. Lilia stood up, furious and desperate, trying to defend the indefensible. But at that dinner, the truth prevailed without me having to raise my voice. And so, at the table she'd tried to turn into a stage for humiliation. She herself was unmasked. That same night, Lilia hurriedly packed her things. Judd didn't want to see her or hear another word. Cedric and I just watched in silence as she walked down the stairs with her bags, carrying the same haughty look, but now tinged with defeat. I arranged for her to live with a distant aunt in another city, where she could raise her son without further poisoning our family. I felt no hatred, only relief. Marcus, in turn, left me a simple letter, full of regret. He didn't deny that he loved Lilia, but he confessed to having been just another pawn in her game. He asked for forgiveness and said he would return to his hometown, far from all that. Strangely, I couldn't hate him. He, too, had been manipulated and used as an instrument in a much larger lie. Judd was devastated. Discovering that the woman he loved was cheating on him and exposing his own weaknesses was an almost unbearable blow. But at the same time, it was the turning point he needed. With Cedric's and my support, he began treatment for his gambling addiction. It was painful to see my son admit his mistakes, but it was also the first time in a long time I saw true courage in his eyes. Cedric and I, after so much silence and distrust, finally looked at each other with the same complicity we'd had before. There were no more barriers, no secrets. He apologized for not trusting me from the beginning, and I forgave him, because I understood that deep down, he only wanted to protect the son we loved so much. Our marriage emerged wounded, but also stronger and more sincere. Months later, we received a photo in the mail. It was Lilia's baby, a boy with delicate features and the same kind eyes as Marcus. On the back, written in her handwriting, was a single sentence. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. His name is David." I sighed, closing my eyes, wishing that boy could have a different destiny than the adults who brought him into the world. Over time, life found a new rhythm. Pain became a learning experience. I learned that the greatest revenge isn't destroying the one who hurt you, but taking away their power over you. I also learned that silent dignity speaks louder than any scream. I didn't need to retaliate with hatred. I simply exposed the truth, and that was enough to end the lie. Today, when I look back, I don't just see a story of betrayal and humiliation. I see a story of overcoming, forgiveness, and a new beginning. I discovered that, even after a devastating storm, it's still possible to rebuild, and above all, that it's never too late to choose peace over poison. And you? What would you have done in my place? Would you have reacted angrily at that dinner, or would you have waited for the right moment to reveal the whole truth? Do you believe that silence can be more powerful than shouting when it comes to facing such a cruel betrayal? Have you ever experienced something similar, where you discovered that someone close to you was hiding secrets that could destroy an entire family? How did you deal with it? Sometimes, stories like mine remind us that dignity is the best response to lies, and that the truth always finds a way to surface. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to know how far this message of courage and new beginnings will reach. And if you want to continue hearing real stories full of twists and turns and life lessons, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Now on screen, I leave you with 2 more moving stories that I'm sure will also amaze you. Click to watch and continue with me on this journey.